The production of this video was made possible by donors to the Orchestration Online Patreon initiative. Please consider adding your support to the creation of free educational internet resources by visiting our Patreon page linked below. And what a perfectly charming way to start our next round of evaluations here with the very, very last group of website evaluations for the 2020 Orchestration Challenge. Starting with Oscar's score here. And, yeah, I'm just going to jump straight into it. No introductions or anything else, but just to let everybody know I'm feeling really, really happy about this last round and about finishing up these evaluations, and there will be more coming up for the Patreon supporters. There are about 8 more owed to the dotted brev / longa level. All right, so that's coming up over the next couple days. Now, to focus on this score, I think we're immediately seeing, like, just listening to that mock-up, we immediately see the danger of this kind of close scoring with very low flute, right? So, as I've mentioned many times in this over the course of these evaluations, the first octave of flute is its weakest register. That does not mean that you cannot use it to state the opening melody. It does not mean that you can't use it because it's a nice springboard to get all the way up to this high F sharp, as stated in the original melody for piano. All right, so that's all really convenient. What is not so convenient is that you can really hear like the sounds that are being used for the mock-up here are, they're a bit coarse, but they do pretty much express that oboe is starts to get kind of grainy and tends to sort of play out and get a little bit naturally louder as it gets lower and lower, right? Kind of a more honky sort of a sound. So if you stick this oboe here and you have it flare, you have the dynamics flare underneath the flute solo, you can hear it right there in the mock-up, right? It's not lying to you. The flute will be, the clarity of that flute melody will be affected, right? Now, you had only to change this note to clarinet, and just to have your accompaniment in this bar not crescendo along with the slur, along with the melody. Because, after all, there is nothing in the piano part that says that the accompaniment should swell in its dynamics, right? That's just something that most orchestrators have put in there because it's an exciting thing to do, or maybe just assuming, if there's a crescendo and a diminuendo in the first 2 bars, that it should be preserved across all parts. Okay, so here I would say get rid of those hairpins and just have this be soft and change this to clarinet, and you solve the problem of the oboe's closeness to the flute, kind of blotting out its intimacy, its ability to really speak out with color. Something that you did here, similar to other orchestrations, and when I say that, I don't mean to say, similar to other people who didn't know how to orchestrate. That's not it at all. There were people who were very experienced with orchestration who still had really, really long piano-like slurs, okay? But I'm just saying that, that a lot of people opted to do that, and the problem is that you just have this kind of endless stream of notes, right? And we have like no emphasis on any downbeat, right? So it might not be the best option there. You might just think about singing this. Da. Just is that the way you want it to flow? Do you want it to be completely, melismatic, right? Do you want that or not? But I mean, all that aside, it's really kind of neat. Like I was saying, perfectly charming. It was really a charming idea to have this as a wind octet, and adding the celesta and glockenspiel. Now here, like this big long slur over the celesta part is perfectly fine because the celesta is a piano-like instrument, a keyboard instrument, and it relies a lot on like pedaling and other kinds of things that connect the notes together. So but my only question is, how loud are you getting here in the middle? Right, mezzo piano to mezzo piano is really not much of a it's not much of a swell in terms of like how big you could get. Now, when you think about the power of the celesta, about as loud as a celesta could ever possibly get would be about mezzo piano compared to the rest of the orchestra, right? So I would say, if you only intend to get up to mezzo piano, at least you'll balance with the rest of the orchestra. But it just sort of seems a shame to kind of limit yourself to that. What if you were to mark mezzo forte in all parts, right? And just so that you really went somewhere, right? Instead of just kind of getting from cool to lukewarm, right? It just doesn't really cause much of a change of color in the instruments when they barely twitch in their dynamics. So, I mean, aside from all of that, it's pretty well, the arrangement here is really nice, with one caveat, and that is that you have the oboe parts here enclosing the second flute, and that is kind of a mistake. Okay, you could do something like that, maybe up a fifth, but in this register where the flute is really at a disadvantage in its middle and lower registers, when you enclose it with oboe on either side, it just basically swallows up the sound of the flute, right? So if you switched these two parts, right, if you had the flute playing the oboe part and vice versa, like the first oboe playing the second flute part, and then here they could play unison together. Or you could have the probably even better to have the second flute play unison with the first oboe. All right? So just really don't overestimate the strength of flute in combinations like this. Now, going on to the development, right? We've got oboe, and I think this is nice. You've got a contrast between flute stating the melody, and then you have oboe plus strings plus violins. That's nice. It has a nice smooth sound. So bum and bum with bassoon. And we've got that same thing happening here. Now, do you want this all under one bow stroke? Down, up. Yeah, you got to think about these things. Now here you go, da 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 da, in octaves with the clarinets on the bottom. That's all cool, except there's no doubling in the strings, right? So I feel that weakens it because you've got the melody here is da 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 dun dun, right? It's not da 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 dun dun dun. That's not what's intended here, right? Lily intends the connections of her melodic arcs to go by step, right? So da, right, bum ba dum da 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 dun 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 dun, right? So that's the actual melody is in the middle here, not the top note, right? So you've supported that top note nicely, but the melody itself needs more support in the strings, right? So you could have gone divisi here, and but it's kind of strange that you've also got the same note an octave lower in the clarinet and still not supported by, say, viola divisi or some other kind of instrument, right? So I just feel it like what happens is the melody pulls away from the strings, and then has to just sit on its own as winds, and it just kind of interferes with the flow, right? Especially since you're going here, pizzicato strings with staccato, mezzo staccato winds. Okay, so hopefully by now you have heard me talk about the dangers of just slurring across different articulated styles like this, right? So, but I'll mention it one more time. And that is that the mezzo staccato is an articulation that comes from the diaphragm, right, rather than the tongue, right? So like if you took away the slur, then this would just be tongue, 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 right? It would be ta ta ta. But when you put the slur over it, it's right? So it's a short, pushed note with the player's diaphragm. Okay, and so it just doesn't make any sense to slur from there into yet another articulation style, right? So it's always best when you have mezzo staccato just to have the slur over the group of the same articulation, right? And then that way the player can hit this accent and tenuto with very firm embouchure articulation, right? Rather than just with the stomach, right? So you're asking the player to go, right? So they're just like pushing with their stomach to get this accent because you have the slur going across it, right? And most people would just ignore that and just tongue on the beat, right? And here you're asking, you're scoring pizzicato, and you're asking for the duration of a dotted half note, and that's just not, that's not feasible, right? It's not going to last that long. The longest you're going to get at this tempo is about maybe a dotted quarter note, or a double dotted quarter note, but it's not going to be a dotted half note. So it's just, it's just not reasonable. And the other thing too is like you have inconsistent articulation marks, right? So bump, 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 accent and tenuto, accents on this, and nobody else gets an accent. You have a tenuto on this, but nothing on that. And I mean, what's going on here? Come on, Oscar. Tell us what's going on. No, just kidding. But, you have to think that from the perspective of the conductor and of the players, is they're going to think, like, geez, the conductor might just say to everybody, hey, at bar 10, 14. At bar 14, just leave out all the accents, or everybody accent, or something like that. Or leave out the tenuto. Excuse me. Yeah, so, I mean, maybe just rethink the way that you are doing articulation styles here. Like the basic idea of the orchestration is great. It's fine. Don't get me wrong. But it's just a little inconsistent. Now, I'm not so sure. I'd have to listen to this again, but it's really important that celesta sounds an octave higher than written, right? So I'm not sure if that was the case here. So I'd have to have another listen to the mock-up. But but it will, in practice, it will sound an octave higher, and that would actually work out great with the pizzicato right in here. That's a cool idea, right? It puts a little bit of an obvious slant, though, on the resolution, doesn't it? Dun 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 da dum. We have notes that are not plucked or struck, but bowed and breathed, right? So, just it almost stands out like a sore thumb. If that's what you want, if you want that real decided difference, bum 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 bum, you have your sort of pluck 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 accent, right? And ting 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 ting, and then you have this, and then right underneath you have this ba-dum, right? Even played pianissimo and smooth, it will still stand out against the more delicately enunciated notes, right? So just watch out for that kind of thing. Now, finally, the ending. Bum, 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 bum. It's nice, but what happened? What about the poor oboes? Don't they get to do anything here? You pretty much have like doubled everything. Like you've got your violins doubling the flutes, and you got your seconds doubling the clarinets, and then you've got your you got the violas doubling the bassoons, just note for note, and the cellos coming in octaves below that with the basses. Okay, so you could have integrated the oboes into the texture a little bit more. Like the oboes could have been playing unison with the clarinets. The oboes could have been playing the upper note of the clarinet here and the lower note of the second flute here, and then you could have had your flutes go a due, so that they would have more strength against the rest of the winds, right? So, I mean, as it is now, this chord is in balance with the winds right at the beginning, right? And then the next chord, the flute is a little weaker and a little weaker and even weaker, and then finally you get to this F sharp, and at that point the violins, it'll all be about the violin sound there, right? Whereas like if you had oboe joining in then and ending also partially on this F sharp, then you have a complementary wind sound for this, and it isn't like mostly strings on top and then kind of strings mixed with winds below, right? So just a delicate balancing act. Anyway, those were the comments that I had to say about your score, Oscar, and just really a fun way to start this last group of evaluations, and feeling really jazzed about it, and still pretty early in the morning over here, even though I did an entire set of evaluations earlier in the day. So let's just see how I go. And and thank you so much for your for being in the community and being a subscriber, and for giving me such a cool entry to talk about. I really appreciate that a lot. Okay, so on to our next entry for the 2020 Orchestration Challenge. So that put a huge smile on my face, Camille, listening to that completely transformational entry. You completely transformed it. All right, it's so different from the source material, and so I'm not going to sit here and judge it on how well it realized Lily's intentions or personality or whatever, because obviously this is all about you and your interpretation. So the only thing that remains for me to do is to judge this purely on its own orchestration, on its own internal logic. How well did it achieve that goal? So let's take a look at that. So starting off, so we have the melody being stated by vibraphone. Bum 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 bum. Now you must realize, okay, and I'm sure it's very clear from listening to the mock-up there, that vibraphone is one of the softest instruments in the orchestra. And not only is it incredibly soft, it doesn't have a sort of a complementary resonance with other orchestral instruments. So, you are damned in one way dynamically, in terms of the projection just being very, very gentle. And then you're damned in another way because, there isn't the texture, orchestral textures are going to want to absorb the whatever is beautiful about the sound of the vibraphone, right? It just, it has unless the vibraphone is just incredibly delicately accompanied, then you will see problems even in something like this, right? You've got all of this bustling tremolo and like unmeasured tremolo, fingered tremolo. You've got sul tasto going on in your strings. You've got like your flutes and the clarinet, little touch of clarinet in there. My recommendation: cut all of the hairpins out, right? You only need one pianissimo at the beginning here with all of this, and just keep it in the background and have the vibraphone basically state what it is going to state. And then it will be much, much clearer in the first 4 bars, right? Okay, then when you get to here, then it's just, you just have the case where going up to fortissimo will just obliterate what's going on the vibraphone, so you might as well not even have the vibraphone play, right? I would say just end here with the vibraphone and have the other elements of the other melodic elements come out stronger, state themselves more, just with more clarity. Because, why can't we hear the melody in the mock-up in these last 4 bars? Well, I'll tell you why. It's because you have your brass coming in with the same exact volume as the winds and strings, right? Had you started off your brass at pianissimo with a crescendo to mezzo piano or mezzo forte, then we could hear the melody much clearer in the violin and first flute, right? They would be much easier to hear. And, and you could even leave some vibraphone in, but though I wouldn't mark it piano. Like here you've got piano and you have like no crescendo, right? So no wonder we can't hear it in the mock-up, right? But even at that, even if you were to do what I say, hold back the brass, even hold back the timpani a bit, right? Just piano to, say, mezzo forte, then we would still have problems hearing the vibraphone when it's matched up with the violin and the flute, right? Because they will absorb some of the quality of sound in the vibes. And this just has to do with the phenomenon of bell tones, right? Generally speaking, in bell-like instruments, the strike tone, the actual tone that you think you're hearing, is manufactured mentally. If you were to actually do basically just do this as an experiment, record like a single tone from a vibraphone or a bell or any kind of bell, right? And then put it on a graphic equalizer and then put everything to 0, right? Now, if you were to figure out which frequency that the strike tone is at, what frequency of hertz, and then just boost that channel, you'll hear nothing, right? But then if you boost it maybe an octave above that, then you will hear different elements, and you can actually isolate the different elements, each individual element that is being heard by your ears, but unless you put them all together, you won't hear the strike tone, the actual tone that you think that you're hearing. And the relationship that has to do with using, doubling vibraphone by other instruments is that those instruments really are playing a fundamental tone. It's not as strong as the body of tone, an octave higher, but they really are playing a tone, and that tone will do its work to make whatever is going on in the vibraphone much, much less special and capable of being heard, right? So that's the danger that you're running by having the vibraphone, scoring the vibraphone in the way that you've got it. And even more distracting the attention with this harp. Whoosh, it's all really great fun for the harpist. And really much better just to use a single straight line with the word gliss in it, right? And going back and forth. But otherwise, I like this. It looks as if you use some kind of plug-in or app or whatever that will play that plays the pitches that you need it to play, sort of like the harp glissando plug-in in Sibelius. Okay, and there's really kind of not a whole lot wrong with anything else, in terms of the placement of all of these pitches and everything else. But yeah, just the brass are just too loud here. Right? They're taking over everything, and you're going all the way up to G in your trumpet, and you're asking them to diminuendo, to be really soft. That's difficult, right? Okay, so moving on, we get to the development section, and so notice I've made no comments about the rejigging of the harmony or any of that stuff. That's all fine. It's all fair. And the same thing's true for everything else that's going on in here. That's cool. That's, if you want to do that, that's all right with me. So this lovely arpeggiation in the harp. What I would recommend is to change it around a little bit so that it's not exactly the same thing twice, because then it just becomes predictable, right? So it's the same, you have the same kind of swooping kind of figuration in the cello, and you have the same arpeggiation here, and pretty much the same melodic arc, at least for the first bar of the second time. So really, you just need to change things around. I would say make this different so that it's not so much of just a repetition. All right, and it's nice that you have a different instrument. You have clarinet stating the melody here, as opposed to vibraphone and flute or violin or whatever. Now we just have the clarinet stating the melody. Okay, now unfortunately, I'm sorry if this just really seems like I'm harping on this, but the melody is actually the middle voice. Da 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 da. Right, it's not dum, right? Because Lily is connecting her little each bar is connected by a step of a single, like a melodic second, right? So da da bum 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 da dun, and then either a unison or a closer note, da dun 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 dun, right? So so that leaping up to this G here, this G is a written G, is intended to be like a harmony, like an element of harmony, right? So we missed that sort of bum bum. It's kind of just a little bit of kind of bittersweet. Lily has wanted this day to come for so long. She's been working on her music. She's been lying in bed feeling horrible. She's been answering letters from France, and she's just people are mistrusting her at the Villa Medici in Rome. The manager's getting on her case because she won't show up to dinner, and she's afraid if she goes to dinner then she'll have an accident, right? She's got Crohn's disease, and they had absolutely no way of treating it the way we do today. So she's just but then she's got this, she's waited for this day, this beautiful day when she can get dressed, clean herself up, get out of bed, go out and enjoy the sunshine, right? So that's that bittersweet thing. Ba-da-da-dum. It's that poignant moment, right, to her joy, right? Which we don't get from bum, 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 which is just more heroic, right? All right, now dum. Now, do you really want dum? Because in the score it was mezzo staccato, bum, 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 right? So it just seems less enunciated, right? It's still all right, but yeah. Now you have the horns coming in and playing. You know, the first horn's playing unison with your clarinet solo here, and I mean, it's just going to take it over. So you're hardly going to hear anything from the clarinet anyway. So I think you should just leave it out, right? Because here you have piano, right? Piano, it's piano all the way through, and you have the horns coming in at mezzo forte. Nobody's going to hear. Nobody's going to hear the clarinets. Nobody's going to hear the harp either once those horns get going, especially, with a note that is as high as F in your first horn, right? So F sounding B flat, right? So that's a fairly high note for the horn. Okay, and then you have your beautiful little answer here. Bum, 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 bum. Okay, and then, I mean, everything else works pretty well. Now, da da dun dun dun. Now, why go da 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 dum and then jump up, right? Why are we jumping up? I mean, I know you like reharmonized everything in here, and that's all cool. Yeah. Yeah, so I'm not so convinced because, da 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 dun dun, right? I feel like Lily is looking down at the ground, right? At the beautiful grass and the wind blowing through it, right? The sun on the grass, right? Whereas if you go da bum, so her eyes were looking down, they're starting to look down. All of a sudden, they're looking up at the top of the tree. It kind of just doesn't make sense to me. Anyways, all right. Now, if you want this swirling kind of string playing to really sound like anything, then it has to be louder, right? So I'm afraid you're going to have to mark it up a little bit, right? So this is mezzo forte. I think that this should be forte, right? I mean, it's sort of misleading, isn't it? It sort of gives the score reader the impression that the strings are supposed to be louder than the brass, but that's not it at all. It's just a matter of balancing it. But yeah, so things are going to get pretty murky scoring triads in the bassoons like this, going all the way down there to that A. It's just really going to be a very murky kind of a sound, right? I think if you had your voicing spread out wider across the across the whole scope, and actually followed maybe the registers of the original piano part, then it would be probably a lot more coherent than and even reharmonized in the way that you're reharmonizing things. It would be a lot more coherent if it were spread out over like 3 octaves or so, 3 or 4 octaves, rather than just everything scrunched down to about 2 octaves. Anyways, that's what I think about your score there, Camille, and just really enjoyed, the audacity of the reinterpretation there, and really cool. Just really enjoyed it a huge amount. So thank you so much for your entry and for being a subscriber and to the website and a member of the community. It's really, really appreciated. And with this kind of rethinking, it would be interesting to see what you do next year when we have the 2021 Orchestration Challenge. All right. So with that cryptic remark, I will go on to the third of this last round of Orchestration Challenge evaluations. Another great score in this last round of evaluations, this time from Noah. And yeah, I mean, there's so much to talk about in this particular score. But the main thing I just want to say is that you took a lot of pains to make sure that your instructions would be very clear. Okay, we've got clear markings on entrances of which instrument is needed, and it's interesting how you had your first flute and your first clarinet in their own in their own little groupings, and of course this sort of 3 oboes here and 3 oboes there is just the result of the way the pages broke and the different groups that you were using. It's not that you were having 6 oboes, right? So I guess I could have cleaned that up a little bit when I showed this page, but there just kind of wasn't enough time. And same thing here with these 2 groups of 3 bassoons. Yeah, let's not worry about that. And then, like a lot of these other extra instruments. All the same, nicely done. I really appreciate your attention to detail. So, if there's a problem in this score, I would say it's one of overemphasis. Okay, like for instance, just the way that everything lands on this last high F sharp. It just really felt to me a little too, just really kind of stating things a little too emphatically. You know what I mean? Just like it just really, it really kind of points at that at the last beat of that bar a little bit too, just a little bit with a little too much weight up there. The tam-tam is such a unique sound and is so extraordinary, isn't it? And then bringing it out and having it as a way of introducing the development just really makes a huge difference. But then doing it again and again, right? The other mistake here is assuming that that a tam-tam can like go down to niente after a roll, right? So the thing is that tam-tams and gongs and cymbals, they tend to generate a certain kind of momentum to their vibration, right? So it's very hard to roll them down to a softer a softer sound, and then like roll them down to like a nothing sound. So it would be better for you just to like stop, right? Just to like do this and then just have an incomplete tie, right? And you would get pretty much the same sound as what you're asking for here. Just the sound of the tam-tam, the energized tam-tam slowly dying away, right? Be really careful about using the niente dynamic. All right? Only use niente when the effect is in itself something that should be paid attention to by the audience. Don't use it as a way of solving textural problems. It would be better for things to go down to pianissimo or triple P, as you have marked here in grayscale. That would be much more realistic than like just throwing niente at different instruments and assuming that they can get down to nothing, right? Only use niente when it is an important effect in and of itself, and it is something that the audience is specifically listening for, okay? Once again, don't use it as a textural element that when nobody's paying attention to it, because if that's the case, just use triple P, and that it means the same thing. That's what you're going to get. It is uncomplicated, and you will have no raised hands at rehearsals. You'll have nobody playing in your orchestra saying, why the hell am I just working my butt off to get this to be incredibly soft when nobody's even listening to me, or nobody even cares, right? Don't mark niente unless the niente is its own effect. All right. So not to harp on that too much. So let's go back to the actual orchestration here, okay? So did you notice in the mock-up that pretty much all that you could really hear was the clarinet at first, and then as things progressed, the flute became more and more prominent? Well, that's also what's going to happen in real life. Because as I've said many times throughout this set of challenges, flute is just very, very weak in its first octave, right? And so the clarinet will just, even though it's playing, lower clarino register, going down to throat tones here, it's still just so much stronger and more stable, right? Whereas here you got sultasto strings with only the viola and the cello doubling the bassoons, and then the first, second violin has no woodwind to double, right? Would have been perfect, beautiful for this to be doubled by, say, English horn, and then you would have had, a very solid chord. But as it is, the bottom part of the chord is strong, and then the top of the chord is weak, right? Because there's nothing doubling it. If you have three bassoons, you could just chuck the third bassoon onto that E, right? And then you have a nice, perfectly balanced chord. So, if it was your intention to get louder, as you get louder, the flute becomes more prominent and better mixed with the clarinet, then that's what is going to happen. But you shouldn't do this, like different slurring strategies in different instruments, because that will be very audible to the people in the wind section and kind of mess with their minds. Okay, so really just have your players do the same. Look, you've got flutes doing two different kinds of slurring strategies. Pick one and stick with it. Now here, obviously, like another thing, there's no way that one bow could cover this many notes, right, without running out of steam. So you need to come up with a slurring strategy that respects respects bowing. So it could be like every three notes. Some people have been doing like upbeat into second beat, right? So da 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 da. Or some people have been like I did, up down up down up down up down up. Not to mark them, but to like just think about that particular, to score the slurs that way, but not mark the bowings. So leave it up to the players to mark the bowings. Okay. Now you get up to Mezzo Piano here and Mezzo Forte, and it's all very mixed. It's strange that you would have the melody softer than the accompaniment. Now, why is that? Why is this tremolo louder than the, why? I don't understand. Okay, everybody should be the same dynamic level, except for the brass should be softer, right? And here you did that, starting off pianissimo. I'd say pianissimo crescendo to mezzo piano, and then have everybody else crescendo to mezzo forte. Maybe you forgot to put mezzo forte in there. That was the intention. You need to go somewhere. Piano to mezzo piano is, it's like from cool to lukewarm, right? What if you went from cool to medium hot, right? Cool to a little above room temperature? Then that would be, I think, much preferable. So pianissimo to mezzo piano, and also same thing with the bass drum, right? It's kind of, it's a bit paced, right? There's a bit of pacing going on with that bass drum, kind of thuds, right? Rather than the elegant ping of a timpani, right? Yeah, okay. So, yeah. I'm trying to think. I'm thinking of this one other thing that. All right, let's not dwell on it too much. But like, yeah, and then you need to crescendo to forte here with your celesta and your harp, right? You won't get a forte out of your celesta. You'll get like a mezzo piano at its loudest. But still, just tell the player you want a nice firm touch there. And the same thing with the harp. The harp shouldn't crescendo to P here, right? It should relax down to P from, because you're not going to hear any harp with the way that you've got this scored. You need to start mezzo piano in both instruments, right? And then get louder, like go up to forte by this point in your celesta, and the same thing here, piano to forte. All right, now going on, dum. Now dum bum da 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 dum. We got the little trumpet coming in there. That'll be nice and firm. I feel that it should be this da should be doubled in the strings, because that's the melody, right? It's not da 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 da. That's not the melody. The melody is da 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 dum as the first trumpet is playing. Everything else fine, no problem with. You're doing a lot of sort of sul tasto to ordinario, and and then ordinario to sul ponticello, and so on and so forth. I mean, that's all fun, but a lot of times sul tasto is sort of dependent a little bit on the dynamic. Experienced section players will tend to put on a little sul tasto when they're playing soft. So, changing from sul tasto to ordinario and then going down to pianissimo, right? They might end up going back to sul tasto just unconsciously, right? So I would say use sul tasto when the effect is just really, I would just say sul tasto all the way to here, and then ordinario at the tremolo. All right, and then bum with the horn. It seems to me to sort of deflate the rugby ball a little bit, to go dum. What if it was da dum or da da dum? It just seems like we sort of lose a little bit of emotional meaning when it's always slurred together. All right. Okay, now bum 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 bum. I've already commented several times on the importance of mezzo staccato being one slur rather than slurring past mezzo staccato into another note, right? Because it just doesn't make any sense, because you are, this is pushes with the diaphragm, push, 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 and there's some magic ability to slur from a diaphragmatic push into just a standard note. It's a phrase mark, right? And then you're saying, oh well, that's a phrase mark, but if it's a phrase mark, then is this mezzo staccato? You're messing with the minds of your players, right? So just keep it simple. And I like this right in here, the scoring in the bassoons. It's not going to count for a whole lot if, with the bassoons mezzo piano and the trombones mezzo forte, right? So how does that work? And you're giving a little bit of wind color to the brass. Nobody will hear it. Right? If you reverse this, then we're talking. Then we're cooking with gas, right? If you go piano, crescendo to mezzo forte here, don't bother with the mezzo piano in the middle. Mezzo piano to mezzo forte, piano to mezzo forte here. And then this, I would say mezzo piano to forte, right? And then you'll get a balance in there. And then we have our little echo, which is kind of cool, flutes and horns. But you must understand that the way that you've got this scored, nobody will hear the flutes, right? Low flutes can't be heard against horns. You could drop this to pianissimo, to piano pianissimo, triple P, and you could boost the flutes to piano, and you would still hear the horns more than you would hear the flutes, because the flutes are just so very delicate in that range. Just kill the horns, get rid of the horns, and just have the flutes if you want that character, right? Or get rid of your flutes and include the horns. You can have one or the other, all right? But if you're going to balance flutes against horns, like horns when they're starting to get bright, very bright and powerful in their overtones, and here you're having crescendo to piano, there will be no flutes left over by the time you get to here, right? Okay, now finally, bum 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 bum. It's kind of cool, I like the octaves in the firsts, and yeah, you're gonna have a lot of weight on the bottom of this with with the lower heavy brass, bassoons, and you're compensating a little bit. You got that third horn. It's kind of strange. You got horns 1 and 3, right? There's really nothing about this that really requires you to do that. Don't score horns 1 and 3 unless you have these big long gestures with the first and the third playing big high unisons together, right? If you're just doing standard concert horn scoring like this, go to 1, 2, 3, 4, right? I've even, I had one score that was actually a major work, and I decided to go 1, 3, 2, 4 with the conductor, and, he got he didn't notice it, and then he got mad and he blamed me, right? And he was just being a little nervous, right? And I, then afterwards it was like, like obviously it was not a big problem, but just don't take that for granted, okay? It's just messing with the normal order of things is not a way to get the conductor on your good side, all right? And see this right here, you got these octaves. Octaves are best between two players who are sitting next to each other, right? Because you need them to be perfect, right? So you want your first and your second to play these octaves. And then you've got these perfect fifths. Those should be covered by the third and fourth, right? Okay. Bum 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 bum. You've got this doubling. It's very Tchaikovskyan, by the way. Yeah, this is really lovely. The flutes will totally be heard. I would just say it's a total waste of time for you to score harmony here in the strings. Just make it all octaves, and you'll have your most powerful. In fact, just get rid of the divisi here. Have the top line be first, bottom line be seconds, and then an octave below that is your violas, and then and then just have like the bottom line played by cellos and basses, and you're in. Okay, well, there's just so many things to pick apart about this score. It's just so fun, but I will not worry about that right now. I will just stop there. And thank you, Noah, for such an intriguing score. Just, really giving me a lot to talk about and think about. And once again, apologies for just like you had really laid things out very carefully with some of these things, and it ends up looking like you had intended for a massive wind section and brass section, but that was just because of the page layout that I messed around with when I turned it into a landscape layout. So now on to the next score. Thank you very much for being a member and supplying such a committed entry. And now we have Ernesto's really satisfying score, and it just done so beautifully, so carefully. I am now going to pick it apart and suggest a bunch of alternate things, and some cautions and some corrections. But really, let's not, be mistaken here that this is a very, nice, beautifully realized score. And in fact, Ernesto really went to town here and scored the entire piece. And I just want to say, it was so deserving of a full evaluation that it really should have been one of my dotted brev evaluations. I could just look at the entire score and talk about it all the way through. And I just really feel regret about that I'm not able to do that. But yeah. So I'll just give you as much as I possibly can right here at the start, Ernesto. Okay, so starting off from the very beginning, I feel that you should have ties in first clarinet as well as in your bassoon, so that it's just maintains it. Da 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 dum bum 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 bum. So yeah, so you don't have da 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 da. I think it's better off, just all kind of tied together. And then you add English horn onto that, and the same thing. I think this should also be tied. Okay. And you do not need to mark your oboe, your Okay, yeah, and yeah, one, right? Solo is not enough, right? You have to tell us which player is playing solo. Solo just tells us that this is a solo and that this part will be louder than the rest of the orchestra, right? And if that is the case, then this should just be piano, right? Oops. Right, this should just be piano. And yeah, and it will sound fine, right? It'll sound beautiful. And then you can just increase through the steps to mezzo forte finally here at the end, right? Rather than just assuming that it's mezzo forte on top all the way through. And notice here you come in with the strings. This should be as the same exact dynamic level as the winds, right? So you get a nice blend, right? Rather than the strings being behind the winds. I don't think you want that here. And the same thing, the strings were not marked with hardly any dynamics at all below that, right? It should all match up. You should also need to reinterpret what Lily's original intentions were dynamically, because she marked piano style dynamics, just like one crescendo after another, when really it should either be one long crescendo or kind of groupings of, it's more to do with phrasing, right? Some people arrange this by saying, piano crescendo, piano crescendo, piano crescendo, and that's actually more accurate to her intentions until you start getting into this bigger phrase, right? So really, we need more markings. I would just say start at piano, go from there up to a mezzo forte overall, right? And don't worry about the melody having to be 2 dynamic degrees louder than the accompaniment. You do not need to do that. You almost never need to do that, okay? Good on you for keeping the horns in the background. That's great. Okay, so I really like this. I love the way that you did this scoring. Mainly winds and so on, and then you eventually added the rest of the strings there. So that's all good. Harp is good, right? I really like this whole approach here with the harp. But, here you use almost exactly the same approach again. So, I think one is enough. Once is enough, right? So I think decide which one, right? Either leave this out here and have some billowing harp at the end, or put it here and leave it out at the end, right? But you have to let the music say what it's going to say and trust it to be expressive enough, right? I could come after you for this idea, like just saying, hey, look at the downbeat over here. But that's okay. I will allow you that one moment of, youthful joie de vivre, right? Okay. That's all fine. So, so the beginning is cool. Now let's look at the development. And this is nice and strong. We have clarinet. Which clarinet? First clarinet? Who? Who's this? Is this 2 clarinets? So we have this clarinet, I think, solo, and a nice contrast to the oboe solo that came before, right? And, of course, doubled by the strings. Now, there is absolutely zero reason why the clarinet has to be louder than the violins, right? There's no need, right? Now, I forgot to mention something here, and that is with slurs. You probably have already guessed by now that the slurring is just too long to fit under one bow. You have to slur to the bow, right? You can't slur to the phrase. That's a piano thing, right? Anyways, and the same thing here. It's it's all doable, but you don't need to tell the string player to play up bow, right? You just need to provide them with doable slurs. And I just feel this dun dun. It's just a lot of, I feel like you lose any kind of emphasis, right? Bum 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 bum, right? Like all single bows, or dun dun, two bows, right? So there's different ways of doing this, but I think all one bow is a little long, and also just like up bow, it actually should be down bow. If you really were insisting on this to be all under one bow, it should be down bow, because down bows eventually taper off at the end and get softer, right? And the actual truth is no bows are what's needed, right? That the player doesn't need you to tell them which bowing to use. almost never, unless you have a specific thing in mind that goes against what the normal bowing would be. All right, so back to the back to our melodic statement. Right, so that's nice. So you've got your first and second violins and clarinet. Here you could actually have like a duet, like have two clarinets playing unison, and that would actually give you a beautiful direct sound. Okay, now first bassoon and English horn, that works really, really great, and also in conjunction with violas, it's perfect. It's fine. Right. It would be even better with cellos, but it'll work fine with violas. Now, okay, so here we get into some problems. So flute down here, like on this E, nobody's going to hear the flute. I mean, you did something great here in not scoring too low for flute, right? Here, the piccolo's a little low, but it's all right. But here, I mean, these E's are wasted. They will not be heard alongside these a duet, a two oboes that just they don't have any, they cannot compete with the resonance of doubled oboes on that pitch, right? You might get away with just a single oboe and no flutes. That probably would be the best of all, right? Or maybe that would be a better note for English horn, and you could have one of your clarinets play that, right? So, I mean, there's a bunch of different ways of tackling this. I'm not trying to rescore your piece. However, here you put a bunch of emphasis all of a sudden on the harmony. Bum, 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 big full chord. And there's so much emphasis on the harmony, we don't really hear the melody. Bum, 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 bum. Right, we just hear this upper harmonic note, right? And then, like, the way that this curves under and then rips up to the beginning of the next bar, we lose the resolution, right? Or the resolution just becomes like swallowed up in the rushing upwards, right? And so like we don't really get the sense of line. So that's the major problem with this, putting this in here. Maybe if it were shorter, started a little later, right? Just like almost like just little grace notes, ba da 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 da, bum bum bum. This probably would be a little bit better. So I would just say take the last 3 or 4 beats, the last 3 or 4 notes of this run and turn them into grace notes, right? And then just make them more part of the downbeat than part of the third beat. And then I think you would end up solving the problem of the resolution there. And also, you can cut some of this stuff and just like maybe give us some second flute or first oboe doubling this line right in here, so we don't get too off track with our melody. Okay, but I do like the way that it dovetails right into this bump, 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 bum, right? That's nice. Now, here, your choice of bass trombone, you could have just used 2 bassoons right here, right? Or you could have used tuba, but I feel that, you can hear in the mock-up, it's a slightly kind of weak T version of what a bass trombone would sound like there. But then again, you are telling them to play at a lukewarm dynamic level, right? Mezzo Piano, right? They could easily just play it at piano, right? Or Mezzo Forte diminuendo. Okay. But I just feel the choice of bass trombone is just a little flatulent. It's a little, kind of buzzy, and I mean, bass trombone is amazing, but it's just like as a response to this very delicate, free, fresh air kind of scoring, it's almost like you get kind of a stomped frog at the end, right? So, I think it would just be better to have 2 bassoons or tuba or even just pizzicato basses right there. Okay, and then we have our little, we had our call. Here we have our response, up an octave, and then filling out the rest of the range, a little bit of celesta on there. That's perfect. I would mark the celesta mezzo forte here, and you get a nice balance. Yeah, and then bass clarinet on those last 2 notes. All right, and I've already commented about how this shouldn't be like an up bow all the way through. right? And da 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 da. Yeah, I mean, I really like this. It's a very likable score, Ernesto, and nice work, nicely done. I just really feel good about this, and I just really feel bad about not evaluating the entire thing. As tired as I am after I'm trying to think how many scores. I shouldn't even count them. I think we're up to 136 by the time I'm evaluating this one. But it's all fun. It's all good. I'm just really enjoying looking at everybody's work. So those are my thoughts on your score. If I don't seem to have as much issue with things and have that many things to say, it's just because your score is good. Take that as a compliment, but mark some dynamics in here. Think of the overall dynamics rather than bringing out the melody so hugely strong. Just have everybody be the same dynamic level, but keep your brass down just like you have here. It's all good. All right, so those are my comments. Nice work. Really, really enjoyed it. Now on to the next evaluation. Now we've got Benjamin's score, and this is almost perfect in terms of like what I usually point out in scores or think about in scores in terms of evaluation. The balance is really well done throughout. There is, the proportions are really, really nice. The interplay between the instruments is good. The contrasts are great. It's really doesn't leave me a whole lot to talk about, Benjamin. But let's talk about a few things anyhow to start off with. Yeah. So, notice at the beginning, Benjamin has told us how many of each instrument and so on. So, starting out, it's nice and strong. You've got the English horn in between the bassoons. That is a lovely enclosure, and it works really, really nice. Now, I will say, in this situation, the kind of surging of the dynamics of the accompaniment kind of make a lot less sense, I really think. When you've got just really exposed winds accompanying another wind instrument. I feel it's just adding too much. So I think just cutting the hairpins here just allows the clarinet to be so much more intimate, right? And I don't know why this would need to be restated, right? It should just be a tie, right? There's enough of a change here just for this slur from the written F sharp to E, right? Okay, and then we have some switching around, which is very cool. We have the English horn, the second oboe, switching over to the flute. Here you could have told us which flute, first flute, second flute, which flute. We have that trading off, and those are actually the paler, softer high bassoon, before it gets too high, is a complementary one to low flute, right? So this can actually be an almost seamless trade-off. So I would say just take away these tenuto marks, right? And then the trade-off will be almost seamless. All right, and then we got the a second clarinet taking over for the second bassoon. That'll work fine. And then you're maintaining the English horn in the middle there. All right, I mean, that's a little less ideal, right? The beginning is perfect, right? Perfectly balanced. it's a little less ideal going on from there because these instruments are, like the flute is so soft, it's so overbalanced or underbalanced compared to the other instruments. So I would say A2 here, A2 flutes would be fine. All right, so da bum 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 bum, and then what I really love about this is just how you don't attempt to trade off you do trade off, but you don't attempt to overlap or dovetail to sort of like give the illusion that one instrument is turning to the other. Rather, the oboe very clearly takes over on its own solo, right? And I think that that's really lovely. And the support of it from the other instruments is great. We have a little bit of pacing from pizzicato in the violas, and then leading to more and more from the upper strings, and a little bit of cello at the end. All right, and then just continuing to climb. I really think that this is cool. Like, I've been talking about not scoring too low for flutes, but this works good. The flutes supporting the oboes from beneath in their like sort of upper middle register, and that actually works really, really well, especially with the clarinets and English horn positioned where they are. It's really, really nicely done. And it just really kept delicate, very, soft horns. This could probably be even a little softer. I would say, like, just have everybody go, increase at the same dynamic level, except for the horns, right? So, you're going piano, crescendo to pianissimo, and that's fine for everybody else to do that. In the wind section, they're fine, right? They can all go to mezzo piano, especially the flutes here, right? And then they can all back off at the same level, and this can come in pianissimo, crescendo to mezzo piano while everybody else is crescendoing to mezzo forte. And then I think that this will work way, way better, especially in real life, right? Then you got a little ding here from the antique cymbal. Their one note, right? The antique cymbal players got their one note and they're happy now. They can just change over to triangle, or they can reach over and play Glock. So and then you've got a little bit of billowing harp there and some cello solo, and you've got. All right, so you're going portamento slide from F sharp up to. Yeah, okay, so this kind of doesn't make sense. All right, so you want to glissando up to a harmonic note in the cellos up there on this note, but like this is actually 2 octaves. I mean, it's the same note in terms of artificial harmonics, right? So you want them to slide up, but then jump back down to this F sharp again, and suddenly play an artificial harmonic. You'd be better off having a separate solo cello, right? So you have the first solo cello slide up and have it sound as if it's sliding up to that high F sharp, and then you have the second solo cello coming in and just providing the destination note. I mean, that's how that would work. But I mean, how can you slide up to a note that is the sound of your artificial harmonic that's sitting there on the same bass where you are, right? Just kind of doesn't make sense. I mean, it's a fun idea, but it doesn't really work in practice. Now, I mean, if you had intended for the cellist to slide up, like, I mean, okay, so you've got this F sharp right here as a possible destination. So if you want this F sharp to be played by artificial harmonics in the cello, then they'll slide up an octave, right, to this F sharp, the F sharp at the bottom of the staff. You can just mark with, you can just leave in bass clef or in tenor clef. So they could slide up to that, and then they could immediately touch the node of a perfect fourth, and then you would get this note up here, right? Is that what you intended to do? I'm kind of not sure what you intended there, but yeah. And then you've got this little resolution right in here with the first trumpet muted, and I mean, that's okay. That's all right, just as long as it keeps softer, right, and in the background. It doesn't play out too much. I think you could even possibly go to pianissimo on that if it doesn't hurt the function too much. I mean, especially since like this will interfere with our ability to hear what's going on with the cello there. If that cello solo is important to you, then the trumpet being, a little bit more forceful there will distract. And you've already got this kind of this billowing harp too. So there's a lot going on in there, even though it seems like very simple scoring. All right. So now let's get to the development. I like these little touches. Bum. First bassoon, and then first cor anglais. I think we've got a copy-paste error here. There's only one cor anglais, right? Dum. And violas both time. Okay, and and then here you've got your you have like unison. This is enharmonic unison for anybody who's not paying attention. If you're going to do that, you could also do an enharmonic unison here of G flat and F sharp if you intended to. And then you could have doubled pitches on both. Now, aside from all of that, just kind of having fun, but pretty well scored, dum, bum, and just really adding the violins in here, ba da da dum, and then just keeping it with strings, bum 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 bum, with a little ting, So you want this on your D string. Yeah, okay. I mean, yeah. More or less that would work. And then you have your little answer here in the winds. Now this will work. Low flutes and clarinets and pizzicato right in there. So that's nicely balanced. I don't know why you really need the accent here, on this F sharp. I don't think you need that at all. Okay, and that leads us to our last couple of bars. Bum, bum, bum. I just don't think you need this up bow here. I mean, I see what you're trying to do. You're trying to go up, down, up, down. But I mean, look, just leave it to the players. I think it's fine. And, once again, we've got a case where there are, like, the winds are basically playing harmony. That you're realizing that octave chord, bassoons, clarinets, and English horn. The bassoons and English horn are playing the octave below. The trumpet is playing the octave above, right? So those are your three octaves. Boom, boom, boom. And then you've got like your middle harmonies walking their way down. The horns between the bassoons and the English horn, that works fine. It needs to be a little softer though, right? So I would say forte on your winds and mezzo forte on your brass. And then the clarinets are supplying the harmony in between, right? And then here, like, there's just really no need to fill in the harmony with your strings. Just play octaves and let the winds and brass give the illusion that the strings are playing harmony along with them, right? And it'll work fine. But I mean, if you insist on doing it, it's delicately enough scored. But I just feel it's you're just adding a lot there. All right. And here you say divisi on this and divisi on that, but not divisi on your, well, I mean, there's divisi back here, I guess, but then unison. Yeah. I'm not so convinced by the way that is scored. Why not just firsts on the top, seconds play this lower, and then the violas double the seconds, and then the cellos play this line. I think that just is the simplest of all. But I'll tell you something and that is if your horns and your trumpet are mezzo forte, they're going to blot out pretty much everything else, the strings and the winds there. So you need to bring them down one dynamic level, or you need to bring the strings up a dynamic level, right? And if you really want to be a perfectionist about it, you could put a destination dynamic that also balances, right? So if we're going down to piano here in the strings, then you could go down to piano in the winds and pianissimo in the brass, right? And then that would also balance. But yeah, don't just mark brass the same level as the winds and strings when you have this kind of integrated scoring where you want the texture to balance, right? Now, if you want the brass to stand out, then go ahead and, make the brass stand out. Yeah, suspended cymbal. Yeah, it's all nice. So, this is a delicate score. It's, it's a little, it's economical and it's really, really effective. So I think it's really, it's a great piece of work, Benjamin. And, I know I just picked it to pieces, but I did want, I did acknowledge at the beginning that I thought it was an excellent piece of work. And I really enjoyed looking at it. And I'm very grateful that you sent it along my way and that that you are subscribing to the website and that you are a member of the Orchestration Online community. And that goes for everybody else in this video, including our next and last evaluation. So let's take a look at that. This will be the last evaluation of the website evaluations. And of course, there are going to be a few more Patreon ones coming up over the next day or two. And now for the very last score of the website entrance of the Orchestration Challenge 2020. And yeah, Rock, I remember your this being the very last entry for the website group. And yeah, I'm really, really glad that you were able to submit this on time. It was great. So now looking at what we've got here in terms of balance, right? Yeah, so it all works fine. I just worry about the fact that there isn't any doubling on the top note, right? So you're doubling the lower notes of the chord here in the horns. And but there's the first bassoon is just kind of sitting there with and it's kind of carrying the weight of being the top of the harmony all by itself, and it could easily be outshone by the horn. So I would say maybe add English horn to that to just maybe firm it up a little bit, especially considering that that our soloist here is like first trumpet, right? Yeah, it's probably no need for this surge right in here, like this dynamic surge. Right? Just leave that to our soloist in the first two bars, and then after that, everything can crescendo. Excuse me. Now, you're sort of transporting you're importing the slurring style. Do we really want that many slurs on a solo trumpet part, right? Sometimes it's nice if trumpet just really enunciates every note clearly without slurring that much, right? Just think ba 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 bum ba 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 bum bum or bum ba ba bum. Just imagine somebody sort of this trumpet is calling out from the darkness and or from the dawn light, right? From the top of a hill, right? We just, imagine that. Do we really want the slur in there, right? So I'm not saying that it's right or wrong. I'm just saying question, right? Ask yourself that question, whether or not that's the right way to go. And then here you just have this massive, massive slur over your first oboe. And then, almost as long slur or half as long slur over the first and second flute. So, I mean, is that the right way to go too, right? Could some of these slurs have been, even in the accompaniment parts as well, could they have been stated, with in shorter groups? Here you've got slurs. You're slurring over the same E for 4 bars. What does that mean? Did you actually intend for this E to be tied, right? So maybe this wasn't totally thought out with as much attention as it could have gotten, right? Okay, but I mean, all that aside, I really do love the resonance, the sort of shine that you've got going on here. Your one problem here is that the brass is going to outplay the winds, and not as huge. It's not a huge crisis, but just that you have so much. You have so many winds overlapping the brass, the horns, right? So I would say, maybe a better way to go here would be pianissimo horns, right? Piano with the bassoons, and if you add the English horn, piano on that, and that's fine. Just piano on the trumpet. That's because you want a nice clear, you don't want to hold back on that. Because you want the part to be hervortretend, right? You want it to be protuberant in the music, protruding, and then continuing on with the oboe, right? I would say rather than crescendo into this, pull back a little bit so that trading off on this G sharp to the F sharp written G sharp is the same as the F sharp here. So trading off to that, just really let it go rather than playing under it and then suddenly cutting off, right? Because that's really audible, the cutoff here. So trade off into the oboe part at the same dynamic and then push, right? So everybody push there. Horns are coming up from piano, from pianissimo to mezzo piano. And then the winds can go from piano to mezzo forte, right? And that is a way to balance that. Here, mezzo piano, and then tremolo or roll down to a pianissimo. And the same thing for the tuba. Keep the tuba soft, right? Because piano in this tuba, it doesn't matter if it's piano, it'll still be really solid because the tuba has such a firm sound, right? So the listener will hear the tuba and they won't really hear the double bass. If you want the listener to hear both of these tones right on the same note, then you have got to bring the tuba down to pianissimo. Okay. And the harp can be scored higher, right? I'm trying to avoid dynamic mixing, but I'm just saying usually you want to keep your brass one level down, and your harp 1 or 2 levels up, right? So it's okay for the harp to play mezzo forte throughout here, right? Because that is the only way you're really going to hear it against even a gentle texture like this. If you want that part to be worth something. And, all of this stuff in here, this fun stuff on the timpani, it could really be kept piano or even pianissimo as well. Just really keep it gentle, all right? So it doesn't dominate things. Yeah. So, I mean, what do you mean here? Do you mean mezzo staccato going to a portato note? Right? Better just to have a staccato and then a tenuto following. Or you don't even need the tenuto, right? Okay, but this is fine. Mezzo staccato on your tuba down here. That's fine, but just keep it soft, please, right? So, bum, bum, nice bowing. Dum, bum. Yep. What if the second violin got the F sharp and the first violin's got what if the the second violin's got this A sharp sixth, and the first violin's got the actual melody of dum, right? And then this is fine, mezzo forte, bum, 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 but mezzo staccato is its own thing, right? It doesn't slur across to other forms of articulation, other styles of articulation, right? You're not going, it's like, it's all from the diaphragm, right? I mean, how can you slur from here to there, right? How does that work to a regularly articulated note? Just let that be a standard tongued, sorry, right? This is what you really mean, right? So just score that. Now, I mean, why isn't the first player playing here, right? Why is the second and third having fun and the first player isn't, right? Maybe you feel, oh, well, the first player had his nice little solo and he's going to be the top right over there, so why doesn't he just save it up? I mean, that is okay. I mean, fair enough, because this high A sharp, or excuse me, G sharp, A flat, whatever, it's, I mean, that is going to be a fairly high note, and they're going to want to get their focus together. Okay, fair enough. Okay, and then we have our little echo here. I think if you're going to have clarinets like this, pianissimo, mezzo staccato, and everything else, and end with an accent, nobody's going to hear the flute in there, the third flute. They can just take a break, right? I don't feel it will really add that much to the quality. Now, if you were to mark the third flute like maybe piano or something, or mezzo piano, or just bring it out a little bit, then I think you would get more of a blend there. But it's pretty unimportant, right, for the flute. I mean, the flute is just really not contributing much of anything. It's just so soft, and especially against the resonance of these low winds all combining and conspiring together, right? It just seems odd man out. The real problem that I see is, you go dun, 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 and then you have this dum, and you're going the dum in octaves in the strings, right? Okay, so all right, so once is very cool. Then you do it again, even though this is soft. Dun, 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 dum. Bum, 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 bum. Then the resolution is da again. There's too much da going on everywhere, all over, and it's even here, right? So you have to watch out about overemphasizing that function in the music, right? Why not just get rid of the strings? Bum, 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 bum. Dun, 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 da, ba, da, 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 da. And we take the pressure off of that, just bringing out, like it just, with these octaves here, just really brings out that quality. And after a while, the ear just gets tired of it, right? Now here, it's interesting how you've chosen to score this. I think that if you're going to make something this big, then the winds and strings should be forte. Leave the brass at mezzo forte. Mezzo forte diminuendo to pianissimo, right? And then this diminuendo to piano is fine. I mean, people avoid just going piano crescendo to forte. Why is that? Or forte diminuendo to piano. I mean, just because it's a simple, straightforward way of doing things doesn't mean that it's wrong. Okay, but especially in a texture like this, the way that you've scored this, the realistic outcome of this is that the winds will disappear, and so will the strings. I mean, there'll be an orchestral sound as opposed to just a brass sound, but it'll really be about the brass with the way that this is scored. If you're going to score all the way down here to written C sharp, sounding F sharp below the staff, it's like the same note as this bass trombone. It is doubling the bass trombone and the tuba. Okay, so that, so otherwise I would say just really watch out. If this were really exposed, I would say you at least want the second horn player to double that. All right? And then you've got a little bit of roll here and some tam-tam. It's kind of meaningless to put a diminuendo mark on the tam-tam because it's got, the player has no control over how it, over how the sound dies off, right? All they have is just at the beginning is just hitting it, right? And then it'll die off itself. The most that the player can do is just cut it off, right? Now, if they were maybe rolling it a little bit, they could roll less and less and less, right? So that it would slowly, the incidence would get softer, but that also needs to be really, really controlled. And I keep mentioning this whole technique with strings playing octaves, and then letting the winds and the brass take over on the harmony, and that way the strings sound as if they're playing all the harmonies as well. I would say especially essential in a case like this. You've really filled in every possible corner that you can with your wind scoring here in terms of the just have this huge, beautiful, rich harmony, this big chorale walking downwards, and you've also filled in a lot of things here with your brass section. All right, so like here with the strings, like you've got 4 staves and you've barely done anything by comparison, just because there isn't the opportunity to do it, right? What do you have the opportunity to do? Well, you could be doubling this top note here with your first violins and just really making it sound much more orchestral. And then the note below it could be doubled by the seconds, and then the F sharp below that, right, could be played by the violas, and then below that you got the cellos, and then you just have your 4-part octave, and you could even be doubling, from below if you wanted to with double basses, just to really give it a nice, a nice clean low sound, right? So anyway, I just feel that the problem with spreading this all out divisi is that you'll have a much weaker string sound. And it'll really be about winds and brass with a little bit of strings mixed in, right? So you want to avoid that. You want the strings to be forceful, right? You want them to have an edge to them. You want the sounds of the winds and the brass to contribute to the power, the majesty, the silkiness of the strings, right? Rather than subtract from them. All right, well, I could spend half an hour deconstructing this last chord here at the end. All right, but there's a couple of little problems in there, but too much to get into. Anyway, all that aside, Rock, I once again, just to reiterate, I'm really glad that you were able to get this in on time. Sorry you had to wait 2.5 months to hear my evaluation of it. But once again, I did have to evaluate these website entries in order, right? So it just works out better that way. So you are my very last website entrant. Thank you for subscribing to the website. Thanks everybody watching for their interest in this yearly challenge. And I would really love to see more people involved. I don't know how I could. If things went up to 200 entries, I don't know how I could find the time for that, frankly. But I think that it's just this year there were so many because of the COVID crisis, just people having more free time on their hands and, sort of being locked away. And a lot of people still are. And, my empathy goes out to you if you are still in that situation. And, and I just hope that you are going to be safe and well, and that everybody's career in music, everybody's musical plans are going to eventually go back to normal within the next year or so. And I plan to offer more educational opportunities that I, as much as I can to help people stay on track with their training and getting ready for future opportunities. All right. Thank you all so very, very much. And this has been the most interesting orchestration challenge that I've ever done. Thanks, one and all, and stay posted for the very last of the Patreon evaluations coming up within just a little while today.